All right, so completely unscripted. I had a customer. Well, I've actually, over the time that I've been streaming and building for other people, I've had several customers, but several customers with this same problem, where a stabilizer wire becomes dislodged from a stabilizer or from a pair of stabilizer guides and inserts, and then their spacebar doesn't work anymore, or their enter key doesn't work anymore, or some stabilized keycap doesn't actuate properly anymore. So I'm going to go over kind of what stabilizer inserts and the guide body do, exactly how the wire clips in, and how you can fix this problem once it's busted. So what I've done is I took apart my TX84 SE, and I have an extra plate and PCB and some stabilizers, and I'm kind of going to show you how that all goes together. But this is a GMK stabilizer. There are many, well, actually this is, yeah, so this is a GMK screw-in stabilizer. And effectively, the wires go into the stabilizer guide channel at the bottom and the insert in exactly the same way in every case. So there are some subtle differences between the bodies of some stabilizers, but, and I'll cover them just a little bit, but generally speaking, they all work exactly the same, and the fix is going to be the same. Some of these are more likely to pop a wire than others. For instance, cherry plate mount stabilizer insert, well, guides. Sorry, these aren't inserts. These are guides. These are inserts right here. Anyway, the guides don't all work exactly the same. Or they don't all look exactly the same. So if you take a really close look at this one, I'll zoom in a bunch. If you take a really close look at this one, you will find that effectively, can't up the ISO on my camera from here for some reason. Anyway, you will find that certain portions of this are designed slightly differently. So the stabilizer wire sits in here in this channel, and it's held in by this retention clip and this retention right there. So it's pinched in there from the top. Similarly, a GMK variant of that thing has a much more pronounced top section that holds the wire in, so it's much less likely for a wire to pop out in an instance like this. Zeal stabilizers are very similar to their GMK brethren in that way, though probably just a little bit less pronounced. No, it looks about the same. Anyway, if you look at a stabilizer, as the switch actuates, it pushes up the keycap, which pulls up this insert inside of the stabilizer guide body, right? And it's able to actuate like this. And the way that wire looks when it goes into the insert, which by the way has two distinctly different sides. So it has this side, which has a hole in one side and then like a little cup in the other side, a false hole. The wire doesn't go into that false one. And then on the other side, it has the single hole and then a big ramp. And so what happens is the wire goes in right here into this bottom one, just like that. And then as it actuates, it can go from fairly horizontal when the keycap is depressed all the way to more like a 45-degree angle. I don't know if it's quite 45, either way. And that ramp on the north-facing side, or the side facing away from the wire at least, is, in this board's case, it's north, has the edge of the wire out of it, and that ramp kind of allows it to actuate in that body. If it were backward, right, if it were backward, the clip would be holding the wire on this end in the stabilizer guide, and it wouldn't be able to actuate at all, so it would just be stuck down. It would be able to point down, which would be useless because there's a PCB in its way. Anyway, so the way these wires go in, and I'll use a zeal example just to make it very apparent how this works. The way these wires go in is it's a little L, and the insert goes inside the body already, and then this wire clips down in there just under pressure. You just apply some amount of pressure and it snaps in past the plastic. So the way that works, if I show you this insert, I make my camera focus real quick, maybe quick, anyway, is if the wire goes in here, and these Zeal inserts are actually much tighter, but if I put this in, it could go either way. These are not oriented left and right in a way that is meaningful. They are able to be used on either side of a stabilizer wire and in either of the left or right guide, right? So that's how that works. I don't know if that's super clear or not to you guys how that functions, but as I stick it in the actual body, so this is how your stabilizer would be sitting inside of your keyboard, right? The insert goes inside the body, and then you would stick the wire in through the middle part of the guide and into the insert, right? And it's not clipped in yet, but it can still go up and down. But then once you apply pressure and clip it in, that just works like that. So anyway, that's roughly how it works. Now, the way that this can become dislodged in function is if I take my example here, my example PCB, well, a PCB plate with keycaps and everything combo from a TX84 SE, you notice that. And so this is really important to note. On some PCBs, this wire can face south, so toward the bottom, right? So that direction, or it can face north, which is that way. Now, if it's facing north, popping that wire back on is going to become much more difficult. You will still have to probably desolder something or do something. But in this case, it's south facing. And in cases where it's south facing, this is a fairly simple fix. So I'm going to artificially pop this wire off just to show you guys that it can in fact be popped back on, and it's actually fairly simple. So for the sake of ease with the camera, right there, right? So now this keycap actuates, but as it's gone out, right, it's gonna have problems. And actually, like, it'll get stuck. Like right now, it's keycap is stuck, whatever. So the way that we fix this is actually, it's a little fiddly, but it's not at all impossible. So what we're going to try and do, because if we just stick the wire straight back in, it'll actually interfere with, sometimes, the bottom of the insert. Especially if this side's down and that side's up when it goes in. Right? So that wire's in there, and now it's stuck. Right? It won't move at all. So the way we do this, we pull that back out without dislodging the other end, right? And then we kind of push them both down. We try to slide this wire back in and find the guide hole or the insert hole. This can be somewhat time consuming, this portion of it. But once it's found its mark, sometimes it's, I don't think I've ever done this with the keycap one, so we're actually going to take it off because this is going to become much easier with it off. Generally, the insert should not come out. Generally speaking, insert should not come out. It actually just fell into place correctly right there when I had that off. But generally speaking, the insert, even with the wire completely out, shouldn't come out. There are little tabs on it that should stop it, but in the event that your stabilizer guide doesn't actually support that, basically what you're going to try and do is you're going to stick your see, it's underneath. You're going to try and stick your stabilizer insert back down into the guide, and you're going to try to push it all the way down and apply some pressure on the wire, and you're going to move the insert up a little bit and around and until eventually it finds the little tiny hole in the actual guide. And of course, I'm doing this on camera, so who knows if it's actually gonna work super well easily, right? It fell in there a minute ago, and no, it's not finding it. So I'm actually finding the cupped hole, so it's probably easier to pull up on this a little bit while it's out. Find the guide hole, and now man, sorry guys, it feels bad. I'm trying. So I didn't actually build this this board. I'm trying to do this in a way that it becomes super obvious on camera. So there you go. Ooh, that felt like it was there. Yep, okay. So I found it. I found the guide's hole and snapped the wire in. And you notice that it's in the correct position because when I pull up on this side, the other side's stabilizer insert goes up. So it's pretty much that simple. I push down on it with my finger. Sometimes these are much tighter than all that. And what you need to do is you need to take a spudger, either a plastic one or a metal one. In this case, I prefer to use metal ones. And what you'll do is, if I pop this back up, so you guys can see with this metal one, right? Bink, right? But it's in place, right? So pushed it forward. Oh, and it's dislodged again. That's okay. Turns out we got it in one time, we'll get it back in again. Again, like I said, this is actually not that hard of a task, and you should not be afraid of it. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna try and get the spudger on top of the wire at an angle. Try and show you guys at an angle, and we're gonna push near where the plastic is, but actually inside of it toward the switch. And we're going to push down and just a little bit forward. That's the type of pressure we're applying. And I just push down with it, and it's considerably more pressure than it takes to push down on the switch, like maybe 4 or 5 times even. But it's not enough to like break the fiberglass components of this FR4 or anything crazy like that. You're not wailing on it with a ton of force. You're just putting a little on it. Anyway, that is how you pop a stabilizer wire back in place. And now if I throw this keycap on, we're gonna find that it functions just right. So that's how that works, guys. Just for a little bit of illustrative value, I'm going to zoom back out just a little bit, and I'm going to show you kind of how this sits, right? So if I throw this stabilizer back together right here, right? So our correct side facing toward there, stick the wire in, pop it in place. Oh, and that was upside down, of course. So remember how I said they fit on either side. They're like totally ambidextrous. Anyway, I don't know if that's the right term when we're talking about, you know, not an animal. But anyway, so a south-facing wire will look something like this. Right, so it'll go in, it'll have screws, and when it's attached to the board, you'll be able to boop, 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 and actuate it, right? And then the PCB sandwiches on top after you've got all your stabilizers in place, then you put your switches in and you solder it. And this is important, right? Because these are not generally removable unless they're co-star stabs, which actually work differently and they clip in on top. Anyway, generally does not work. There's no way to remove these with the plate attached with switches soldered in. You'd have to desolder it all to pull it all out. You want to avoid that, but there are instances where you would need to do that. And I'd like to explain at least one of them because it's fairly important. So, especially if you have cherry plate mount stuff. So if you have cherry plate mount stuff, what you're going to find is that the bottom part right here doesn't necessarily, and it depends. I think newer ones actually do, but it's very possible that this bottom part won't actually be touching the PCB. And in that event, this little guide's channel, I'm calling the channel this this portion right here that hangs off the front, where this plastic piece out here retains it, and then this plastic piece up here retains it, right? And then the plate actually sits between the top of that piece and then the bottom of that top piece right there. Anyway, this little channel thing can break off, and I actually have an example somewhere of that. I have one that's broken. I don't know. I'm not going to find it. Either way, in the event that that little front dangly bit cracks off, you'd actually need to replace your whole stabilizer guide and well, the insert's probably fine, but the guide would need to be replaced, and that's problematic because now you have to desolder your whole board to replace that piece. You may, if you're super creative, find some way of like fixing a little piece of epoxy or something, using some kind of releasing agent or something so the wire doesn't stick to the PCB or plate. I don't know. I can think of ways where you might be able to get away with it, but the right way to replace that, to repair that, is actually to just desolder the board, get new inserts, and put them on there. And so, for a number of reasons, these inserts are not as good as PCB mount, especially screw-in PCB mount stabilizers. However, sometimes that's all that your board supports, or it came with it. Like if it's an OEM board, that might be all you get, right? So you don't have an option. The other common type of PCB mount stabilizer is something like this, which is a pop-in, right? So this kind fits in the same kind of board, like this H87A. I don't know if it actually fit in the H87A very well, but maybe it will, and we can find out pretty easily. The reason I say that is because these are oblong holes. Maybe it will fit well. I don't know. Anyway, and they're universal. It looks, yeah, it doesn't, it's pretty loose in there. But in a board that's in other boards where here's actually a good example. It does, yeah, see, it just kind of falls out. But in this side, you can tell that the top stabilizer hole is smaller and the bottom one is more oblong. So the oblong one takes this cleated foot here, and then the two-pronged edge goes in the smaller hole. And so it would go something like this. Obviously, you would be using a much smaller stabilizer wire, a 2U stabilizer wire here, but it would work the same, right? So the way that these are problematic is they are still a little bit looser to the PCB than, well, they're looser than even plate mount ones are usually, but they're also looser than the screw-in kinds, which are very rigid, which is what's on this board right now. But those are removed by these two little pronged tabs right here being depressed inward. And so you would literally put your fingers there and go boop, and then it would pop right out. And so The problem with these is that sometimes those little plastic bits, which are compressed inside that hole a little bit anyway, they bend inward, they kind of migrate inward, they get looser, and eventually as you're wailing on one of your keycaps that's stabilized, there'll just be enough vibration and it'll pop free, or the board will be in shipping and it'll smack around and it'll pop free. Same thing can happen to the wire, especially where the retention clip is less substantial, like it was on this cherry one, where it's way less substantial. Anyway, and so it can just pop out. And if it pops out, you're going to do the same kind of number where you're going to find the guide, the hole on top, you're going to find the actual guide on top, you're going to find the hole, you're going to try and line it up, and then you're going to push on it from the top and try and snap it back in. Unfortunately, it probably won't work that well if the little arms have kind of fatigued inward, and eventually it'll pop out again and it'll cause your stabilizers to jam or be wonky in some other way. And really your only good recourse there is exactly the same thing: desolder your board, put better stabilizers or new ones on, and go again. The good thing about those snap-in ones is when you do desolder your board, you just use GMK screw-in ones. And of course, don't forget, when you do use GMK screw-in ones, which this board does have, and it does have washers, don't forget to add little washers to the equation. The reason you do that, I use bigger washers in mine usually than this one has. As you can see right there, there's a little red nylon washer in there, is to prevent shorts, right? The biggest negative to these screw-in stabilizers is that they can cause short outs if there's pads underneath where the screws mount. Anyway, that's about all the time I'm going to devote to this topic, but I really hope that that helps somebody out. Don't get me wrong, I love dealing with the customers that I deal with. I find that most of the people in the community are great, easy to deal with. I love, you shipping me your cool boards and me playing with them and me fixing them for you and being the hero in that way, I guess. I don't know, I don't really look at it that way, but I'm happy that I can help customers out. However, if this is something you can do easily on your own, I highly recommend it. The hardest part to popping a stabilizer wire back in is literally unscrewing the case and getting the plate and PCB combo back out and then into a state where you can mess with it. I tried describing this in text to a customer recently, and it took way longer or it's way more difficult to understand probably than this video. I'm sure I give you guys way more information than you need, but I hope that it services everyone out there and that you all are able to do a little bit more maintenance or work on your own boards without too much trouble. Anyway, without further ado, have a good one, guys.